I see this as a consequence of government interference. But just to say, well, people need it, we have to have it, let's give it to them, even run up the deficit more. And what you do is when you pump money into anything, you get higher prices. You don't get better quality. It's a major, major problem, but medical care, just like everything else, should be delivered by the marketplace. But if you care about the poor, you have to investigate the notions and the principles of sound money, because this country is going to get a lot poorer once the world recognizes that we have a very weak currency and that we have gotten away with literal economic murder by being able to print the money for the world, and they continue to take it. And that eventually is going to make a lot more people poorer and suffer from these problems. So I expect if we don't change our way, there's going to be more people in poverty rather than less, unless we change our ways.
Teresa, thank you for the question. I have a quick follow-up for you based on what we were talking about with the television portion. You're from Texas, and you said that your district makes up a lot of the coastline area. You referred to defense against hurricanes. We're all well aware of the Katrina FEMA problems, the very poor federal response to a lot of people that are in need and remain in need to this day. Given your philosophies of smaller government and trying to get more of the local response, how would you respond to a huge Category 5 storm like that that needs a lot of resources if you didn't have something like a FEMA coordinating all of the efforts?
Well, I just don't accept the principle that FEMA is efficient in doing the job they have to do, and they're not certainly efficient in the way they use money. So they came down and they brought a lot of money, and they passed out a lot of money. You helped pay for it, $2,000 a piece. And they found out that people just, well, if you're passing out money, the lines get long. And people came in that hadn't even been injured by the hurricane. So it's just the most inefficient way to do anything is to have national economic planning. The more acute the emergency, the less national planning that you want. The district was hit not too long ago with flooding out of San Antonio area, and we had to bring in FEMA. By the time it was all over, the local people were so fed up with FEMA. They came in and they pushed all the local people aside. Local property owners couldn't go check their property. The police were pushed aside, but it was run by FEMA. And the Red Cross had to listen to FEMA. And they got sick and tired of FEMA. And the notion that you can have a central group in Washington, D.C. with a bunch of bureaucrats do it efficiently. It sort of reminds me about how to settle the problems that we have in Iraq by sending in money. We read the story where they sent over $12 billion of $100 bills, 360 tons of money, and now they don't know where the money went. In a way, a lot of that happened in FEMA. What about the trailers? We all had to help pay for it. The trailers were down there, well-intended. Yeah, it'd be nice if you could move into it. But they bought all these trailers, and they didn't fulfill the FEMA requirements. And they weren't used. They're just sitting down there. So the whole idea that the federal government can do it better, or even if they have the authority to do it. You know, the whole principle of flood insurance helps create the problems. I mean, you can imagine me living on the coast and saying, you know, flood insurance is not a good economic program. Because what it does, people who don't live on the Gulf Coast are required to subsidize us, and I have a house right facing the Gulf of Mexico. And the only place you can buy insurance is through the government. Well, you know, it's subsidized. Why? Well, the rates would be too high. Well, that's telling you there's risk. But if the government pays for it, it means the taxpayer takes the risk, somebody who doesn't live on the Gulf. So why do people that live in the desert someplace have to pay our insurance for me to build a house on the Gulf of Mexico? So one problem leads to another. When you try to solve one problem in economics, you usually end up with two new problems. And I'd like to reverse that trend. Get rid of a problem or two and reverse that where we have less problems. I happen to just believe that small government, local government, individual liberty, and voluntarism solves problems about 100 times better than a giant bureaucracy.
Congressman, let's go online here for a moment as we are online. We asked you to send us some questions via the email, and our first question comes from Stewart A. Smith of Orange. Stewart, thanks for sending this in. Congressman Paul, please state your position on the North American Union. Congressman?
The North American Union is something not a whole lot of people know about, and they should, because it's coming. It's an outgrowth of the NAFTA agreement. I believe in free trade. I consider myself one of the strongest free traders in Washington. But I don't like managed trade. And what they call free trade under NAFTA and WTO and all these organizations, that's managed trade by international government for the benefit of big corporations. So I'm positively opposed to that. So I'm opposed to NAFTA. And the outgrowth of NAFTA is the North American Union with a unified currency, the Amero. They already have a plan for a highway running from Mexico up to Canada. 12-lane highway with trains in the middle, and it's going to be an international highway. And there's been some secret funding already into our budgets to start this program moving. There's going to be eminent domain powers used to confiscate tens of thousands of acres to build this. So I still believe in America. I believe in the national sovereignty. I believe we should be out of the UN. I don't believe it serves our interest. I believe that we should be like the founders advised. Be friends with people, trade and travel, and that's why we don't fight. We get along with Vietnam now because we trade with them. We get along with China now because we trade with them. But as soon as we talk about international government entangling alliances and military force out there, you end up with a mess. Matter of fact, those of us who talk this way, sometimes they say, yeah, you're just one of those old isolationists. But just think of what our policies have done in the last 15 or 20 years. We have become isolated from the world. We're diplomatic isolationists. We should be talking to people. So, not international government, no North American Union, but quite willing to talk to Canadians and Mexicans and do whatever we can to facilitate trade and travel, but also protect our borders and protect our national sovereignty.